Since everybody is saying something, I will also want to say a few words. Firstly, I think one should think of Ambedkar as somebody who has contributed two kinds of ideas, two ways of thinking of India. Let us put it that way. One is to think of Dalits and other kinds of minority suppressed groups. What is going to be their future in democratic India, in independent India? How does one ensure their equality, their dignity, their fraternity in this new kind of society? So this was the one of the important issues that was facing Ambedkar in the 1930s and 40s, because it was very clear that we are going to get independence, then there is going to be Congress government, then Dalits are there and other people are there, they are very poor, they are backward, they are oppressed, and they are facing all kinds of discriminations and attacks by landlords, and they are landless, they are poor, educationally, socially, culturally, they are suppressed. So given this scenario, what are the kinds of safeguards, what are the kinds of mechanisms that one could insist in the new constitution? So that was one important task. So many people today who celebrate Ambedkar's birthday, they remember him for that he has implemented or at least proposed the idea of reservation, proposed the idea of sharing of resources, sharing of power through reservations in parliament and assembly and so on. So he is somebody who thought that in a new democratic constitution there should be some rights and some mechanisms to ensure equality to the suppressed and the voiceless. So this is one important contribution of Ambedkar. But in fact, much more important contribution which is often neglected. It's neglected, not talked about from both sides, from the Dalits and the other minorities, and also from the mainstream and dominant groups also. They don't want to talk about the other Ambedkar. The other Ambedkar is much more kind of radical Ambedkar, an Ambedkar who visualized a democracy, a new kind of democracy, a republic, a completely, totally transformed, revolutionary kind of society. So this is the Ambedkar that is not available today. For us, we have an Ambedkar who will ritually garland and then go home, and we don't take anything from him. So because anyway government is giving. So what, and because of that, we have also learned this. We have learned this art of how to argue for our rights. And there are mechanisms to implement reservations and give us this right. So in fact, today if you think of any section in India, so Dalits are actually most vocal and vociferous section today. That there is discrimination, oppression continuing, but still there is also tremendous assertion. I mean, EFL is one example of that. That you really have substantial number of Dalits and Adivasis who could really argue their case. So they are discriminated, they are humiliated. I'm not saying that it's not happening, but clearly, so they clearly know what is Ambedkar's message. They clearly know that we can really fight and argue for these kinds of rights. And they know that the reservations, they know that what are the provisions in this constitutional mechanism and how to fight those. So this we know. We have learned how to fight with the mainstream society. We have learned how to deal with the mainstream society. But we have not learned the other important message Ambedkar was talking about. Ambedkar is talking about completely changing Indian society into a new kind of society. So that involves not only fighting with the upper caste and mainstream society, but also fighting within your own self, fighting with your own community. So because the society is completely divided by different kinds of subcastes and different kinds of ethnic, caste, religious, all kinds of identities, how does one bring about, even if you say something like SSC, OBC, minorities, unity and all that? It's a very, very difficult kind of task, very, very serious kind of task. It's a very challenging kind of a task. So we coin this slogan, but it's a very serious transformative kind of an agenda. So you really have to think, and at the center of that task is changing of yourself. Self-critical thinking is the most important aspect of that. So you can criticize other people, that we have learned. I'm saying that we have learned effectively. We criticize, we can silence the other people, you can get your thing done. And that is very clearly that we have learned in these 50 years. But what we have not learned is to actually how does one deal with other kinds of people within our own groups, within our own communities, within our own oppressed groups. How does one bring about a cultural and social kind of unity to fight against the other kinds of dominant groups and to bring in democracy? In fact, if you want to think of Ambedkar's idea of democracy, so why is Ambedkar interested in democracy as opposed to caste? In fact, his own idea is that his own democracy is not in terms of everybody gets reservations, everybody gets a piece of land, and then there is democracy. So his idea of democracy is much more fundamental in the sense of cultural, emotional, social. It's not just at the level of formal recognition of your right to go to school and draw water from temple and so on. So in terms of fraternity, the fellow feeling that you mix with other people and all are equal in terms of human beings and so on. So his idea, for example, if you take his annihilation of caste, his idea is that what is democracy? Democracy is a system, is a value where you will be able to communicate with all other people on equal terms. That there is a correspondence, there is a dialogue, you talk to other people, you negotiate, there is an interaction, there is communication, there is friendly feeling, there is fraternity and so on. So if there is anything that is lacking today in the Indian kind of situation, especially among the oppressed groups, is this, that there is no fraternity, there is no kind of social and cultural kind of unity, and there is no attempt to dialogue with other kinds of groups. And in fact, Ambedkar's message here is much more fundamental and serious than reservations and other kinds of benefits. And also for him, democracy doesn't mean that you give rights to oppressed groups, so democracy is automatically ensured. So for his own task is about the entire society, the entire Indian society. He wanted the society to be organized completely on a kind of different line. So if he is saying dialogue, if he is saying exchange, communication, interaction, fellow feeling, fraternity, so it meant the fraternity with all other kinds of communities, all other kinds of groups. It's not fraternity of Dalits. We all be together, fraternity of Dalits and Adivasis and tribals, Adivasis and minorities and other oppressive communities. So that is not enough. Unless you actually make a dent into the mainstream, unless you win the friends in the mainstream, unless you make a larger kind of a community which believes in some of these values. So this is where I think the self-transformation is important, and his message is not exactly in terms of only the Dalit rights, because that is why he has seen the connections between equality. If you argue for equality, you have a responsibility to argue for equality for various other kinds of sections. You have to accept that you treat women equally, you have to accept that you treat minorities equally, you have to accept that other kinds of groups equally. So this is the message, this is a difficult message, that which we have not learned to digest. So I think this, as students, now I'm completely clear that your rights are guaranteed, nothing is going to happen to you if there is anything. So I am there, various other people are there, several organizations are there. So the violation of rights we have addressed very, very effectively, and critiquing the mainstream we have done very, very effectively. But Ambedkar said there is also the larger transformation of what is the alternative, what is the kind of society that you are going to build. In that society, the fundamental task is your self-transformation, your behavioral, your attitude, your own practice of democracy, everyday democracy. So that is, I think, important message. EFLU requires that, especially EFL student community requires self-criticism, thinking about who am I, what am I doing, how am I behaving other people. So how does one, in fact, build some kind of a unity? It is not by, generally saying that SCSTs are all friends and we are all equal. So that really doesn't help. So you really have to seriously think. There is an answer in Ambedkar. So I appeal to you on this occasion. Don't make it just simply a kind of a ritual. Take the substantial Ambedkar, so the real Ambedkar, and I think I request you to implement it. Thank you.